Can you purchase Donald Trump NFTs with Atari tokens? I don't know, but today we're going to find out. Or we're going to talk about the Atari 50th anniversary collection right here on Bog Panda. I am Dr. Mike at Official Pagan on everything, and joining me as always.
Hi, everybody. This is Kelly, Atari Token Baron at KELLYTHUL on Twitter and Instagram. And almost forgot. And we would Mike would appreciate it if I would mention to you, perhaps you could like and subscribe to the channel, comment on a few videos, watch all of our Doom content repeatedly. Get that overall viewership hours up. We'd really appreciate it. But more than anything else, subscriptions and the likes help the channel out. So give it some thought, but watch a lot of videos too.
As many as you possibly can, then watch a couple more. Make a big playlist. Just let it lull you to sleep. Drift off to the soothing sound of our voices.
We are known as the ASMR of retro gaming. So
It has been said by us, but it's still been said.
that's right. We've said it several times. So must be true.
Counts. So at this point, now we've already mentioned the Atari 50th anniversary collection, how cool it looked. But at this point, both you and I have purchased this.
Correct.
So we figured we'd give you guys kind of our initial impressions on this. And obviously, we're going to delve more into this in the future. So expect to see some Atari content as we have in the past. But I think this is going to be a good way for us to kind of delve into some of the history of Atari, as well as do some cool game reviews and things like that. And, maybe if you guys are into it, we can kind of expand into other things, because especially when it comes to Atari Jaguar, there's a huge, huge base of people who still make homebrew games and indie games. I think just this past year, I came across 4 or 5 different fully packaged Atari Jaguar games that were released this year. There's just such a big community for that. So, what are your initial impressions, sir, now that you've had your hands on it for a couple of days?
Well, as is often the case, we were right. We made we made some predictions early on. Our first read on this looks pretty cool, and indeed it is pretty cool. So I am it has lived up to every expectation I had, exceeded some of them as we go through, and maybe it'll be in the deeper dive. There's a little tiny tweak or two that I might offer up to improve the overall package, but by God, it's just, I mean, it is tiny, tiny little points. I think the thing so far I've been most impressed with is kind of the overall navigation and structuring of this combination of games to play, the history, a timeline, multimedia content. You're getting videos sometimes, photos sometimes, really kind of cool um, behind the scenes documents and all kinds of interesting things that I just love. I just always find that stuff super interesting. And so it's immersive. It's great. It looks fantastic. It sounds great. But so that's mine. And my focus has largely been more at this point on the content and the context around the games and those things versus actually this is a combination of all that information plus a bunch of games to play. But I've been focusing on the content. What were your first reactions? I think you took a little different approach than I have so far too.
Yeah, I delved a little bit more into the games first, just because I really wanted to jump into the Jaguar. I really wanted to take a look at some of the reimagined titles that are on there, which are updated remakes of a handful of classic games, as well as a new game that was made by Digital Eclipse for 2600. Which I haven't played that one yet because it is a sequel to a game series. So I want to just work my way through that series, so I'm really familiar with it when I get there. I did check out some of the additional content, and honestly, the other content is what I'm most excited about with this collection. The reason I haven't delved into that too much yet is I knew we would do some sort of a first impression show, and I will go down that rabbit hole and not come out until I'm through all of the documentation and videos and reading every manual and looking at every scrap of information. So I would just never get to the games in time to do this show if I had gone down that path. So I wanted to get some hands on with the games. And like I said, especially Jaguar, I wanted to see how the Jaguar games played, There's a lot of Jaguar stuff on here. There's 9 Jaguar games, most of which I had not played before. Some of which are the most infamous ones on the system. You get Cybermorph, which was the back-end title that everybody has opinions about that you can easily find online. Fight for Life, which a lot of people consider to be one of the worst fighting games of all time. It was the last title that Atari released for the Jaguar. And you also get Missile Command, which was the only VR game released for Atari Jaguar, because Atari Jaguar had announced a VR headset that they didn't actually make, but made a game for, which is a very Atari thing of them to do. Just like when, one of their most famous blunders was, of course, the ET game, which was released unfinished, and they printed more copies. They manufactured more copies of the game than there were Atari consoles in existence, which, doesn't make sense at all. So that's a typical kind of Atari move at times in the way that they were navigating things. So they made this VR headset game and didn't make the VR headset. That's a very Atari move. So it's awesome that that's included on here. But yeah, I wanted to work my way through some of the games, get a little hands-on experience. I also made it a conscious decision to play these with the at games controller, which I have right here with me because I've been playing them on my laptop. Um, my my initial thing is it's what I really like. A lot of the emulator boxes that are out, like Super Console X and things like that, depending on the game you're playing, depending on the era of the game, you really have to go in and mess around with the configuration of the controls. Not that that's a difficult thing, but it is nice in this. I haven't really had to do that. Like every game just kind of formats nicely to this Xbox style controller. I don't know what your experience has been with controllers yet.
So I've not done a lot with the controller, and I was actually going to go with my Xbox One controller, but I think I'll go your route and see how the At Games holds up on that. So I've just mostly for the games that I've gone more in depth with, I've used the keyboard methods for the games that offer that option. So there's a couple games that I was pretty fired up to play, but I was like, oh, I got to go grab a controller and all that. So I said, I'm gonna sit back on those right now. But I'm glad to hear that because um, that is a challenge on some of the emulation boxes like Super Console X. Try and play a Nintendo 64 game with an Xbox like controller, but it's not a good deal. Even with a lot of work on configuration. I have found with that though, to sidetrack, that the USB, you can get a Nintendo controller with a USB connection, and that actually has worked out really well. So, but that's good. But it's good to hear because, and that's, we'll get into it a lot more in the deep dive. I mentioned already that I'm super impressed with the navigation and structure. It becomes pretty easy to sort out. Typically when you get into the game a little bit, whether this is, if you have options, what those options are, and toggle between them, and get the information on what controls what and all that. So it's a really well designed package. Tons of work on the collection, on the archiving they've done here. The goodies they found are great. I have interacted with some of the reimagined games already, and super beautiful. I mean, we see kind of what Breakout could become or has become. Pretty cool, very cool actually. So overall, very, we had expressed a lot of excitement. We've now both got it. I think the excitement remains, and we're looking forward to doing more. I'm looking forward to, on our deep dive, talking more about how much success I had on streaming from my laptop to my At Games Legends and using the control deck on it to play some of these games. And I'll be shocked, but super pleased if I'll be able to use the trackball for some of the games. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, I am curious to try it on that. I've also, especially for certain games like Cybermorph and things like that, which has a draw distance of like 2 inches you go at that time. But I do want to see that on a projector because Cybermorph it is one of those 3D polygon open world kind of games. So it's definitely going to lend itself to a larger screen like that. My quibbles, just like yours, are incredibly small. And it's really just nitpicking, like just finding something to quibble about. The out of the box native presentation of every game is with a CRT filter on it. I know those are extremely popular. They're on most of the arcade cabinets that I have. They're usually an option on mini consoles or any of the kind of retro gaming boxes for emulation that are out there. I don't like that. So that's just my personal thing. And I know I'm apparently in the minority on this, but that's the kind of default setting. It's easy to change that, but that was the default setting. So I would kind of forget and go into a game, and it's on the CRT filter side of it, but it does give you different options for, borders and bezels and things like that. The CRT filter, you can stretch the games out to widescreen if you're an absolute maniac who hates games for some reason. You can do that, but otherwise, everything looks great. Everything plays great. I was especially, I really wanted to hit the Jaguar games first. As I said, I know that there are issues emulating some Jaguar games, which is why you don't usually see them on those like Super Console X style emulator boxes and things like that. While there is a huge Jaguar community, a lot of people are releasing games on cartridges or things that are tailored to work better on emulators when they're making them now, so that they can release digital copies through Steam or through their websites and things like that. Whereas these existing games, because of the strange architecture of the way Jaguar worked, and there's some mention of it in the content, because I did look to see if they kind of like delved into that. They kind of scraped the surface of it. There's tons of videos on YouTube, and a great one that just came out that I'll have to send Kelly the link to, that really kind of delved into how the Jaguar worked and how that was what hurt the Jaguar at the same time. It used this weird chipset that mixed 32-bit, 64-bit, and 16-bit processors. It was a really complicated structure. And because of that, what ended up happening was companies, because they didn't want to waste time and money, just ported 16-bit games over to the Jaguar because it did have a 16-bit processor in there. So why, learn something new or spend a bunch of money on it when you could just do that for free, essentially, and just port it over. So that's what happened. So of course that led to a lot of games, not looking twice as powerful as they should have and things like that. So, but that's a lot of interesting stuff that I feel like we can get into on a deeper dive. Mm-hmm. I was concerned though to see, or not concerned, but interested to see how the emulation looked. Everything plays great and looks great. I tried all of the Jaguar games, even the VR game, and because you can play the non-VR version, the only version, because they never released the VR headset. Everything plays great. It also, I was concerned about how it would translate to, one of these Xbox style controllers, because I have a Jaguar, which I bought long after the death of the system so that I could play a couple of games for it. The Jaguar controller is like holding a Commodore 64 keyboard in your hands. It's gigantic and cumbersome and has 8,000 buttons on it. So I didn't know how that was going to work on here. I haven't had any issues with it though. Switching the camera in Cybermorph was a little bit weird because you can switch angles back and forth as you could with a lot of those early 3D games. That's done on the controller with the number pad. So obviously you don't have the number pad. It really wasn't hard though. You just kind of had to remember which analog stick movement switched your camera angles. It's not a big deal. It took a couple seconds to acclimate to it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to digging a little deeper into the Jaguar stuff. Well, and everything that's there, because the new game, just all the kind of upgrades to the existing ones, the reimagined ones. So from a gaming perspective, tons of fun ahead. Obviously, a lot more content to go through as well. We'll come up with additional maybe tiny little improvements we see as we go into our deeper dive. The only other one that I'd add now, which again is super tiny and small, is given the amount of information that's here, once you start down that journey, and I'm not noted for having a great memory, uh, I can't like bookmark or put a little flag down or say I got this far. So the next time I come in, I don't have to kind of navigate the timeline to get there. I figure it out and I get to where I need to get. But it'd be nice to have a fast path to say, you want to pick up where you were reading before? That'd been pretty cool. Again, first world problem. It's like there's all this amazing content. I have to hit the arrow key 5 times to get where I need to be. I
There's too
live.
much awesome stuff.
Yeah, it's so hard to keep track of. Um, yeah, send someone to my house and tell me where I'm at. But yeah, we'll. But so that's that. That's it. But yeah, I'm excited to go a little bit more. It is pretty awesome. If you're an Atari fan at all, you should get this. I just really
I don't
think
even think you really have to be an Atari fan. I think if you're a fan of like old school gaming or just gaming history, because
history
this
is history.
does very much feel like an interactive documentary essentially
Yeah.
of this kind of era of video games.
Yeah, and props to Digital Clips for how they put it together because there are a ton of documentaries out there on all different aspects of this retro history stuff. Um, and so like bits and pieces that I'm getting from there's been a couple pieces of completely brand new information I've gotten with this. But a lot of it is stuff I've heard at least parts of before. But the way this puts it together with the timeline and context and the actual content that they have for it, it just all hangs together for me. It makes more sense, makes me appreciate a little bit more what was happening on in those early days and the kind of entrepreneurship that was going on with these folks. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's all really great, other than, our super first world problem quibbles. My only other one, and I'm sure there is a solution to this because I'll probably just switch controllers. The game that I've spent the most time playing is the new Yar's Revenge, which I believe is called Yar's Revenge Reimagined. Um, it's great. It looks great. It plays great. Yar's Revenge is one of those games that's deceptively simple, the original one. Everything takes place on one screen. There's only a couple of things going on the screen, but there is a complicated element to it. I don't want to go too much into it because I'm sure we'll do a review. There's a complicated element to it to get good at the game and to win each of the levels. Um, the only problem that I had with the new one, it keeps the gameplay identical, which is great because the game played perfectly the way that it was. It just upgrades all the visuals and sound in a really good way, and everything looks great and plays great. Part of Yara's Revenge is going into this like safe zone that's in the middle of the screen. The rumble pack on the controller when you're in that safe zone just goes insane the whole time you're in there, which is a good amount of time when you're playing the game. So it becomes very tiring on your hands after a while. Again, this is the most first world problem complaint ever. So I'm sure there's probably a way to turn that off, and I just haven't looked into it, or I could just, use a different controller. So it's really not that big of a deal. That would be my biggest complaint so far.